already, and since I was already involved in creating meetups in Argentina, where I'm from, I wanted to do the same here, so this is why I started. So yeah, welcome to everyone that is joining. Like I said, I will see if we can do the live stream on YouTube. I'm getting a lot of messages also to okay, guys. So I will we will start 2 minutes more, and we should start so Anna can start with her talk.
Yeah, ready when you are.
Yeah, sure. Now I can see. Yeah, now I can see you. Okay, perfect. I will stop my video and mute myself when we start. Okay, admit Guadalupe. So we are going to have people from not all over, but kind of. I know there's a lot of people that will join from Argentina. I don't know which other parts of Latin America for sure. Germany as well. As I saw in the YouTube, sorry, in the meetup page, and yeah. So I will open the chat. Just for those who are joining, we will try to make some questions for Ana and for Patricia at the end of the talk, like in every event. And it could be nice if you can, instead of writing the questions right away, as soon as you have it, maybe you can write it down for yourself, and then you can write it down in New York is in the house. Nice. Greetings from Buenos Aires, from Nido. This is an agency friend of mine. And yeah, like I said, we will do those questions, and it will be nice if any one of you can take notes by their own, and then you can, at the end of the talk, you can put it in the chat, and then we will read at least three or four. We'll see to have a good time and answering every question that you have, that you all have. Otherwise, I strongly recommend you to all that you are connected already to follow to Patricia and Ana. Ana is UX point by point Ana. So UX by Ana, you will find it. And Patricia is UX Patricia. You will also find it super easy, quickly, and on Instagram. So yeah, they're really sharing really cool stuff every day. So I don't know how you do it. It's like a lot of posts every day, and also working for sure, and also giving talks. So yeah, multitasking for sure. Okay, I will double check on my messages. Just 1 second. There is okay, participants, and just wanted to check. Okay. Someone told me that it's working, but I think it's okay. I think there is a lag. Okay, so let's get on with it. There's already 30 people. Okay, admit. Okay, I will ask other people if they can see if there is one. I think everyone can admit everyone. At least this is what I configured. So we'll see. So like I said, for the new ones, welcome to everyone. This is the very first event from the IDF. I hope we could have these two great designers here in Cologne. But yeah, next time I hope everyone is fine, healthy, and taken care of. And yeah, obviously you and your family. So let's get on with it. Anna, I will not introduce Anna. She will introduce herself. But it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining, and thank you for the talk that you are giving. Even more also in this time that is super important to have in mind how to run a lot of things remote, and even more. And I was asking myself the other day about the research and so on. So yeah. So yeah, welcome, and this is all yours.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Just yeah, I will not mute yet, but just yes, okay. They said yes in the chat, so
Yes,
it's okay.
awesome, great. I'm gonna try to share the screen as well, like with the
Yes, yeah,
slides.
you
Let's see
should
if
be
it's
able.
gonna work here. Um, mm, so I think the desktop here. Let me see if you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see it.
With the slides, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Right, okay, so I'm gonna present now. Right, so I'm going to introduce myself first. So my topic for today is going to be about taking your UX research remote, which I think is very relevant during this time. So that's why I choose to talk a little bit more about this topic. And so just a quick introduction. Let's see if I can, yeah. Like, my name is Ana, and I am based in Portugal. I'm an independent UX consultant at the moment, and I have worked with many companies all over the world. So I was living in the UK for many years, and I've recently come back to Portugal, where I had the chance to work in the mobile UX project for Google in Portugal, which I loved. And at the moment, I do full-time consulting and teaching. So actually my primary background was design, but at the moment I focus more on research and the strategy side. So I'm currently based in Portugal. I know there's everyone a little bit from around the world. So yeah, feel free to leave in the chat as well, where you're from. I know some of you already started. And so yeah, so to get started, so times are changing. So things are changing about the way we work. And this is not an exception for research, for UX in general and research. So each day we see that everyone is working more remotely and trying to adapt to this new reality. So as UX designers, one key thing actually is being able to adapt. So it's not exception for us. Like, we do need to be able to adapt. And when it comes to the UX field, it can be, some parts of UX can be more difficult than others. And research can be really difficult to be fully remote. That's why we're going to be talking about. So going full remote, and why is it so difficult, right? So the first challenge, and of course, like, this is my personal opinion and experience as well. The first challenge when it comes to do remote research, to conduct research, it's what I call the behavior, right? What we call the behavior. So for those of you who are, I'm sure we have people from different levels of experience in UX. From those of you who already have some experience, they already know that attitude and behavior are different things. So attitude is what we think, what we feel, and behavior is what we actually do. So just giving a quick example here. If I say I'm scared of spiders, so this is an attitude, a belief, this is what I think. And then my behavior could be something like, I'll scream and I run if I see a spider. So that's the main difference we have between attitude and behavior. And what happens a lot in user research is that sometimes it's difficult for us to understand our users because we are not asking either the right questions, or we are not understanding what is this difference between the attitude and the behavior. That's why many times we have people saying, do not ask what users want. They don't know what they want. So that's one of the main things. And of course, when it comes to remote, I mean, it's even more difficult, because if in person it's difficult and we can actually observe and talk to people. So if in person is really difficult to understand behavior, imagine remotely. So it's really, really difficult, right? So that's one big, big challenge. So just to give a review of the behavioral research methods. So if you're familiar with research methods, we have mostly qualitative and quantitative research. And these are some methods that actually focus on the behavior. So as I mentioned, observational studies, ethnography, and even moderated usability studies, these all focus on behavior. We are trying to understand what the user does. Obviously, in ethnography, we are talking about a different phase in user research, and it's usually one of the most complex as well when it comes to taking it remotely, because we are trying to explore a problem space, or we're trying to validate an hypothesis right in the beginning stage, like in the early stage. And then we have also evaluative methods, such as moderated usability studies. So that's also qualitative research method, and in this case, it's also behavioral. So we are trying to understand what users do in a certain interface. So both of them are examples of qualitative research that focus on behavior. And then quantitative research that also focus on behavior, and it's a bit easier when it comes to do it remotely. So when it comes to quantitative research, we have unmoderated studies, we have A/B testing, we have analytics. So these ones are easier, let's say, to do it remotely and in a more automated way. But the big challenge here is the qualitative research. So that's the biggest challenge we have here. So how are we going to do qualitative research remotely? How are we going to understand the behavior of the users and do it remotely? That's one big challenge we have at the moment. Second challenge is the lack of context. So, of course, when I talk about ethnography, when I talk about observing people, we are talking about observing people within the real context, within the environment. So we do have that limitation even as a researcher. We have that limitation now because we are doing it remotely, everyone at their own houses, right? So that's another big challenge. I have this graphic, actually I've designed on my Instagram. If you want to check on Instagram, I have this graphic, and this graphic explains also a bit when it comes to qualitative and what I mentioned, the behavior and also the attitude. So if we think about it, even when it comes to attitudinal methods, for example, interviews is something that we all do and is one of the most popular research methods. And even when it comes to attitude, it's still different sometimes to do interviews. So we lose the context. We cannot do things like contextual interviews, for example, because we cannot interview these people within the context of the use of the product or within the real environment. So that's a challenge because when it comes to actually understand the users, so even if we are interviewing them, trying to understand the attitude so then we can get to the behavior, there are many challenges here. Qualitative research is a big challenge nowadays within these circumstances. So and the challenge number 3 is that quantitative data is not enough. So we can use and we should make the best use we can of quantitative data at this moment, but it's not enough. So on its own, quantitative data is not enough. We really need to understand deeply our users. So why is qualitative data important? I think most of you already are pretty much familiar. Qualitative data, it does provide in-depth understanding. We can work with smaller samples of people and we can get rich insights, like the needs, the motivations of people. All right, so research cannot stop. So just because we cannot do things the way we used to do, and there are things that cannot be replaced, that doesn't mean we are going to stop. So research cannot stop. So we need to find solutions. And that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about. about ways that we could potentially do to actually continue doing research despite the challenges. So how to overcome these challenges. So how to make sure we continue doing things like qualitative research. So how do we do it despite the fact that we should take it remote? So we need to adapt. And this is what it's all about. Taking your UX research remote is being able to adapt, is taking those methods that you already know about and that you already use, but taking them remotely. So taking your UX research remote. Okay, so some of the things you can do. So the first thing is online recruiting. So when we recruit users, of course, there are many different ways to recruit users, but the first thing is we need to make sure we are recruiting the right users, the right participants for our research. So if we are not able to recruit the right participants, that means making our research inaccurate. So that's a pretty important step when it comes to recruiting users online. So creating a screener, it's not different doing it online than doing it physically. It's exactly the same process. And you can, of course, use even existing online panels. So that's actually something that is really easy to do it remotely, because instead of being focused within a certain area, let's say, so when you recruit users, you have traveling costs, or you do need to limit yourself to people within that certain area. So when it comes to actually remote research, that's a limitation that you don't have anymore. So that's something you can make use of. So online recruitment is actually something that you can apply to your advantage, and it can be even cheaper. So you can even cut on your budget. So creating a screener is essential, creating a screener to filter the right participants, and you can use existing online panels. So some tools you might already heard: userinterviews.com, Discout, user testing. So these are all tools that have online panels, so you can use them to recruit the right users. Social media as well. So it's really easy nowadays to get into social media and send your screener, send your survey, and make sure you are able to screen the right people. So when it comes to social media, nowadays everyone is connected, and it's really easy to make someone. So the same process through a screener, through a way that you can gather the criteria you are looking for. So recruiting users online is easier than ever nowadays, and we need really to make use of that. So that's one of the solutions I propose. Use social media, create a screener, keep the process, and use online panels if you need to. Of course, if you have a product, you can also use your existing users database. And again, you can reach so many people, right? So the other suggestion is online observation. And this is not something that it's as common, but it's something that also works really well. So you remembered I mentioned attitude and behavior. So attitude is what people say, and behavior is actually what people do. So on social media, you can actually gather some of this information and actually get a little bit of both. So you can try to see what people are saying, of course, which is really easy, with hashtags, with topics, searching online. So it's really easy to stay updated what's happening on social media, even talking about a certain product. So this is more what we would call secondary research. So it is not, of course, like it's not directly with your users, but it is still a way to do observation. So I know this is really new, like we are used to do observation within the context. And there, of course, as well, there are different types of observations. Sometimes the researcher is also the participant, and sometimes we are only observing. So here in social media, you can actually do both. You can be an active participant as a researcher, or you can just watch what's happening. So that's another thing we can make use of when it comes to research, is online observation. So we can really get some rich media insights as well. Here, qualitative attitudinal methods. So this is one of the most important ones. So we should not stop doing qualitative attitudinal research. So methods like interviews or even focus groups. Okay, so interviews and focus groups are not the same, and one of them is not a replacement for the other. So I get this question a lot: which is better? Is it interview one-to-one, or is it a focus group? Well, the answer is it depends. So it depends on your research goal and the type of questions you are trying to uncover. So there's no right or wrong here. However, those are both two methods that rely heavily on the factor attitude. And when I talk about attitude, is because we are asking these people directly about what they feel. Even if we talk about what they do, which is behavior, the answers these people are going to give you are still based on attitude, especially if you're going to ask them something that they would potentially do in the future. So that can be very, very tricky. So what is the solution? And the solution here, one of the solutions, and this is something you should always do, even when you conduct interviews in person, is to make sure that you focus on what these people have done. So this is called past behavior. So every information that you get from interviews, focus groups, they are self-reported. So self-report data has some cons, of course, like this is based on what people tell you. And what people tell you, and of course, there are some cognitive biases. People can tell you the truth. Sometimes they might not be comfortable. There are many factors that play. However, besides that, so besides the fact, even if someone was being 100% honest with you, we would still have the fact that they are reporting the attitude. So ways to try to get around this is, one, try to understand the past behavior. So instead of asking them what would they do, we ask them what have they done. So this is a way that you can actually measure behavior through attitudinal method. So one of my suggestions is keep going with the attitudinal methods, don't stop doing them, and use them to uncover some of the behavior as well that you can't do it. So another way is that you can screen you should screen the right type of participants based on the criteria on the research goal, but you can do it remotely, like you can do it across the globe. So even if, let's say, you can use not only a laptop, you can use a mobile device, and I'm going to get into a bit in a bit as well, but going mobile is another way, like capturing people within their environment, even if they're not at home. Of course, nowadays it's a bit more difficult, it's a bit more limiting, but we can still play with those. So one way, there are many tools like Zoom, Skype, Hangouts, Google Meet. So there are many ways to do this. So we don't need to stop conducting this type of research. So another way to take your research remote is continuing and combining the quantitative research methods. So quantitative data can give us many insights if we know how to combine it properly. So if we actually apply mixed methods, we can uncover many interesting insights. And then if we think about the first challenge we had, which had to do with the fact of trying to understand behavior if we cannot be with people, if we cannot be physically in person with people. So one way to do this is to combine quantitative research that you can easily do remotely. So quantitative research, of course, is based on larger samples. It's more based on the what rather than the why, but you can still do many things. So for example, you can do unmoderated usability studies, and this is the behavioral method. So you're actually trying to understand what people are doing in a certain interface or in a certain website. So this is all behavior. You can also actually do attitudinal as well with surveys. So you can combine surveys with interviews. So that's another method that you can combine together. And you can also, of course, always analytics, and even session maps, which is a lot about the behavior. It's what people are doing in real time on your website or using your interface. So this is all data you can and should continue collecting. So you shouldn't stop doing research at all, and you should make the best of what you have so you can combine them together while still doing it remotely. All right, so the slide was this one, the last one. So lastly, it's about going mobile. So when it comes to actually try to reach people and we are not able to meet people in person anymore, or even if we ignore the current circumstances, actually there are always occasions that we're not able to physically meet people. So remote research is always useful, and going mobile is one way to try to get around that limitation as well. So when we go mobile, we try to capture insights within the real context of use. So let's say that the user is located or is at the moment in another place. So mobile, whether that's a mobile device or laptop, I mean, as long as we are able to capture these people in different environments. So these are some ways that we can do to take our research remote and continuing and actually trying to overcome those challenges. So just because there are some challenges when it comes to in-person research, we should not stop doing research. And these are some ways that we can overcome. So yeah, so that's pretty much that. So thank you so much for hearing my short talk, and I think now it's time for discussions. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Aaron.
Bravo. Okay, I was about to prepare some applause, but I couldn't find out some quick. But yeah, so there is actually one question here. So now is the time, people, that anyone can ask questions. So don't be shy. We have time. So okay. Loana Cardos, she's asking, how do you go about uncovering behaviors when you conduct interviews remotely?
Mhm.
This is one. We have another one already.
Okay, we can start with this one. So that's really interesting. So as I said, when it comes to interviews, this is a really good question, because when it comes to interviews, they are an attitudinal method in theory. So we are going to measure mostly the attitude, not the behavior. So how do we overcome that limitation? So the best way to do it is really focus on past behaviors that the user has conducted in the past. So instead of trying to, for example, ask things like, how would you do this? Or what would you do if, always avoiding as much as possible, we cannot predict future behavior, even ourselves, even when we think something like, I think I would do this if I was in that situation, is always a bad question when it comes to interviews. So if you want to get the best from uncovering behavior, you really need to focus on past behavior. So you should, one thing that works really, really well in interviews is focusing on a specific time in the past. So you can ask the last time someone has done something, or you can ask about a specific negative experience. So that works really well because it's what is fresh in the memory. So that really helps you understanding a certain behavior. And then if you interview many people, then you can start gathering some patterns about that. Sorry, I stopped hearing you. I think you're on
Sorry.
mute.
Yeah, I was muted for sure. Yes, like TV. Okay, thank you, Anna, for answering. So, okay, let's go on with the other one. The other one says, Abish. Okay, I will try. Not all the names are so easy to read, but anyway, it's saying, when you say capture insights from a mobile, how would we do that? A software, he said, or
Mhm. Okay, right. So when I talk about mobile, I'm talking about every method I mentioned. So, for example, when I talk about interviews, it's the same type of software you would use. So, for example, Zoom, right, or Skype. You could, of course, it depends a lot on how tech savvy your user is as well. So that's another criteria you need to pay attention to. But even if it's usability testing as well, like you can, most of the usability testing software is also available on mobile. So to make sure that the user is able to use them on mobile or even using the laptop, as long as they're able to be in another place. So for example, if they are at home, on a desktop, we're gonna limit them to that specific environment. But if they are, let's say, at a specific location where they use that product, so it can be a different location, so they are able to be mobile. So that's pretty much that.
Okay, now I'm not on mute. Okay, great, thanks. So we have another, I was checking also the YouTube, just in case we have another questions, and we have one there, and we have one other more here. And the other one is regarding what tools emulate a traditional moderated usability test remotely?
Traditional
So,
moderated usability test remotely. Okay, very interesting.
yeah.
So actually, I think we can even simplify what we do in a traditional environments when it comes to moderated usability testing when we do remotely. Because if we think about it, moderated usability test requires quite many resources like in person, because we need, for example, we need two different rooms, because we need an observation room usually, and then we need the room where's the moderator, where there's the participant. We usually need different cameras. We need something that captures the movements of the user. We need the webcam. So actually, when you're doing it remotely, some things you can, there are some limitations still. Like, of course, like for example, if you are doing it a mobile test, for example, you might not be able to see certain of the movements of the person, but you can still record first of all, it's very easy to just use something like Zoom again and record both the screen, like we are doing now, both the screen and the participants, so the participants' expressions, the way they talk. So anything you do moderated, you need to make sure that you are scheduling exactly the same as in real life. So you can use a tool. For example, there's a tool that is really actually interesting for prototypes called maze.design. It's a really nice tool because it's made for unmoderated, because it can be automatic. So for example, you can send a link and just send to the person, and user testing as well. Like user testing you can do unmoderated very easily. But when it comes to moderated, so if you want to do actually traditional moderated usability testing, you need to do the same process. You need to schedule a session, you need to be with your user. So regardless of the tool you use, you need to book, you need to be there, because you want to discover rich insights, and that's only possible with qualitative data. So with moderated, you really need to be there, especially if it's an early stage prototype. You need to be there, you need to explain some things to the user, you need to follow up. So basically any tool that you would use with unmoderated, but make sure that you are there with your participants, record any insights, and then you can share the recordings with your team, like it was a real-time scenario where you are have with your team. You can even make your team shadow. I never actually tried, but you can make your team shadowing. Instead of being in an observation room, you can have your team on Zoom, for example, now just on mute, or something like that, like it's a observation room.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and also I have a question. There is one on YouTube, but first, because you brought it, that's a good point, and this other question as well. The other day I had a call actually with some guys that they're doing remotes. Let's say they go and find like user testing, right? Usertesting.com is a tool for
Yes.
doing remote, so you don't need to take care about finding the people and so on. And there is another one that is actually here in Berlin. Is teston.io. Then I will write it down in the chat, and also probably you can write it down, that one that you mentioned in the chat, so everyone can have it.
Yeah.
And I mean, do you have any experience with that in terms of difference, right? Because I know that there is maybe a lack of not being there, right? Versus watching a video of you need to reinterpret it, and this is a bit of bias. Maybe sometimes I didn't use it yet, but I want to try it because maybe you are like not there, but you'll see in a video and you can see the face and you can see the attitude and so on. Maybe sometimes you're guessing. I don't know if you have an experience with this.
Yes, yes. So that would be exactly. So user testing would be unmoderated, exactly, because when, if you are not there, so there's not a moderator to guide the user, we can still, for example, the fact that we have a video of the user and we have the user thinking out loud and going through the process, we can still give the tasks. So we can still get some interesting insights. So it's better than, for example, just giving a link to the user and have them actually complete the task. So pure stats. But still, if we are giving the link to the user, like for example, the one I said as well, like I'm even going to write here, Fine, is the same. Like if you just give the link to the user, they access. They can record or not, but whatever it is, they're doing on their own. However, moderated, it gives you much more qualitative data because you are sitting there with the user and you are not sitting remotely. You can be on Skype, you can be on Zoom, but you are watching them, but also interacting with them. So you can actually follow up. For example, something interesting, when a user does something that was unexpected, you can even probe, like in an interview, like a follow-up question, for example, oh, interesting, why did you click there? Or, tell me more about why you did that. So it's always going to be more qualitative, but it's still a good method. So like I said, combining quantitative and qualitative is really important. So it's not something that it's better or not as good. It's just something that can be complemented. So usually larger samples, but combining both types of data. I think you're muted again, no?
Yes, I was muted. Sorry. Thank you for answering that. I was having those ideas. There is one more and the YouTube, and then we are going to close this. There is. Do users need to go through the same process, sign NDAs, agreement? How do you incorporate this part?
Yeah.
Loana is asking that.
It's a great question. Yes, exactly. Especially if you are recording, like you are recording them on Zoom and you're going to share. Yes, you should always go through the same process. So you can do it online. I recommend you do that before. So have everything set in place, especially if it's, for example, if you are going to use like if it's a real project, basically. Of course, many times like students do this a bit more informally because they are going to keep the recordings for themselves. So in that case, you can do it a bit more informally. But if you're going to use them in a real project, you're going to be sharing this with your team. You will need the recordings for yourself because you will need, of course, you need to keep the data anonymous, but you need the recordings because you need to transcribe, you need to analyze. So yes, the users need to be fully aware. They have to agree. Some of these tools like user testing, because they actually have these agreements and they have the incentives most of the time in place, which is great because you really need to make sure that this process is also clear. How do you give the incentive, how much, and how does that work? So yeah, the user needs to be fully informed and needs to follow all the rules. Usability.gov is a great website for that as well, like Usability.gov, to get some of these legal forms and things.
I will also paste this in the YouTube. Okay, great. Thank you. And also, there is one more questions, and then we jump to Patricia. The difference between the presential and online interview. I mean, this is what actually the talk was about. But did you find any problem to connect with people? Yeah. So this is what we were saying. So to make them feel comfortable. Let's say in terms of being online.
Oh, okay. So the question is it difficult to make people comfortable?
Yeah, exactly. To connect with people and to make it feel comfortable. Yeah.
wow, really good question. I like that one. It's a good one. It is, I mean, it is difficult, right? I mean, it is difficult in person already, like when you are meeting with a stranger, making it comfortable. And that's one of the biggest, for me, it's one of the biggest challenges of doing research as well, like being able to connect and also being able to, like to not be biased and, to not give hints. Like that's a huge challenge already when it comes to research in general. So when you are doing it online, you get that extra challenge because you don't have that environment. You don't have that, hey, how are you? Do you want some coffee? That kind of, I was actually reading an article the other day about, in general, the meetings nowadays. Like we only see the faces, right? Like we don't see the full body, the interactions, exiting the room, getting into a room. So yes, that plays a part and is not a replacement for real human contact. So that's a thing. It kind of applies in general, even work setting. Like this is not a replacement for real human contact, but you can try to make the user comfortable, like the same way you would do it in person, like starting with easy questions, make sure that they know that they can leave at any time. They don't need to answer anything they're uncomfortable with. So yeah, I mean, it is possible, and always making sure that you are showing your face as well, because it's a huge difference as well if you are doing on the phone or you are actually showing yourself in video, so creating a bit of that contact. But to answer your question, it is a bit of a challenge, and it's not a replacement for real interaction, but it is possible to do it.
Okay, great. So, okay, thank you very much. Sorry for the other questions that we cannot answer now, but I recommend you to, maybe they can send you a message to you, and then follow Ana and on Instagram, and anyone that was not answered can be answered there. So we can continue with Patricia. Thank you so much, Ana.
No worries at all. Thank you so much for having me.
So welcome, Patricia, again. You can unmute yourself, right? No, that's weird. Unmute. Okay. Now you are.
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
Perfect. Yes. Great. Okay. So yeah, this is live TV. Also.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much. Also, again, she was helping me with the testing before everyone is connected. Some of them, some of the people watched that test. Was awful. I was so nervous. Anyway,
that can happen.
Yeah, sure. It's the first one, so I'm more used to it to do it in the real life, not online. Yes. That's just more. I'm more like
exactly what Anna was talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So pitch perfect.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So welcome again, and yeah. So the stage, the online stage is all yours.
Awesome. So thanks for having me. I am going to share my screen now. How is disabled attendees? And then we will see how that goes. Okay. I think you need to make me the host first, right?
Again, yeah, maybe, because I think, okay, yeah. I think, perfect. Sorry.
Yeah?
Yeah, now you're.
Don't worry about it. I will try again.
Perfect, now we can see it.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Awesome. So, hello again. Thank you so much for being here and staying in the stream. I am going to talk about designing beyond the screen. So designing for some kind of a future scenario, not for the screens we have at the moment, but for everything which happens beyond the screen, I would like to say. The interesting thing is that smartphones nowadays are just some kind of a transitional technology, and we are actually working towards a world without screens. But this doesn't really mean that we won't have screens. It means that everything will be a screen. So that's really interesting. How am I actually coming up with that? So Statista actually says that the augmented reality market forecast is expected to hit 75 billion in revenue in just the next 4 years, which is actually pretty soon. So why am I talking about that? So everyone who doesn't know me, I'm Patricia Reiners. I'm a UX UI designer and worked with Adobe the last year about the future of design and focusing on immersive technology. So AR, VR, and also voice interaction. So everything which happens beyond the screen, I would like to say. I'm working as a freelance designer, a lot of prototyping, innovation for different companies and clients. But also, yeah, I'm sharing knowledge on like social media, giving talks and workshops and those kind of things. All are some kind of related to the future. And this is actually one of my very first projects I did like 2015, where I designed my first virtual reality project. And it's kind of interesting because you can see still like my phone was in this plastic thing and it's wired to the computer. And there you can see like Unity 3D and Cinema 4D, and you know, it looks so different than nowadays when we have like the HoloLens or the Magic Leap. So many things that have actually changed in the last 5 years, which makes me really, really excited as a designer. So to see what like from the technical side actually improved in the last 5 years. So before I'm starting with my topic and talking about my learnings, I want to clarify a few expressions. And the first is actually beyond the screen. So I already used the expression beyond the screen a lot. What does that actually mean? So we have the human being, we have the computer, and we are kind of familiar what happens if we, you know, put those two together. We have some kind of a human-computer interaction, so nothing new. But what's interesting is if we integrate the environment as well, because if we like put those three areas together, we get some kind of a mixed reality, and there is where it really gets interesting. So what kind of technologies do we have at the moment who are actually supporting that? So of course we have the smartphone, right? And smartphones are becoming even more powerful AR machines with spatial sensors that will unlock AR use cases, kind of. And devices are getting new chips and sensors and processors that are designed to power immersive experiences, which is interesting, but like the future will more go into a direction of like smart glasses, for example, where we have at the moment the Magic Leap or the HoloLens. The problem with them is that they're actually quite expensive. So like the typical user doesn't really have them. And then if we think a little bit more into the far future, we have smart contact lenses, which is very far away, but still an option which we need to think about. Some other interesting expressions what we're using nowadays to talk about things beyond the screen are things like VR, AR, MR. So let's clarify real quick what they actually stand for. So the first thing is that we have virtual reality. And the interesting thing about virtual reality is that this is some kind of a full immersion. So this technology is like a full immersion for the user in a completely virtual environment that is generated by a computer. So the most advanced VR experience even provides freedom of movement. So user can move in a virtual environment and hear sounds and those kind of things. We have augmented reality. So this is some kind of a environment where specific digital information is just some kind of an overlay. And then we have mixed reality, and there is where it gets really interesting, because there the real world is some kind of mixed with the digital object, and they interact with each other. So virtual reality, digital environment where the user is really like shut out of the real world. Augmented reality, where digital content is on top of the real world. And we have mixed reality, where those both areas come together and the digital content really interacts with the real world. So I think we cleared everything we need to know. And like my goal here for this talk is actually to share 5 things that I learned designing beyond the screen. And I want to share with you some examples and some learnings, and hope to get you excited about those areas as well. So let's get started with the first one, which is I think like the most important one to really understand in the very beginning. And this is opportunity spaces. And this is what I actually started with. So for every kind of design or thing we are doing, we need to make sure that they really provide value. And we have the same thing with AR, VR, or mixed reality, or those kind of things. So I actually started by looking for opportunity spaces. So where are they already integrated well, kind of? And of course, we have games. I guess many of you know Pokemon Go, I think. Really successful game and super fun. Then we have areas like medical, which is really interesting, especially AR is already used for like surgeries and those kind of things. And it's working pretty well, although still a lot of research to do, but in the process. We have areas like navigation, and there I'm seeing a lot of opportunities. We have retail. I guess many of you have already tried out the IKEA app, I guess. Then we have repair and maintenance, which is more for, yeah, I would say like for the business, for enterprise corporates and those kind of things. We have tourism as well, which goes really close to navigation, and social media as well. Actually, we have many, many more areas. But what's in this first point really important to understand is that we need to make sure that it really provides value. So first thing, actually, if you were designing any AR, VR experiences, is make sure that this digital content is really a great add-on and provides value when you add it on your natural environment. So very first, super easy first step, I think, before you start with everything. So my point number 2 is engagement with the user, and there it gets actually interesting. So what helped me to come up with solutions, or like to actually prototype for clients I'm working with at the moment, is to think in user stories and try to understand the whole story. So the whole story of engagement with the user. And I kind of started to think about stories. So things we already doing as a UX designers, right? So I started to think beyond the screen and thought about different visuals during the day. So typical day, start in the morning, someone, is working. Could be their home office, could be at an office, could be somewhere. So they're standing at their desk, doing mails, having calls, having meetings. Then in the afternoon, when they finish working, they're going home, they're using their bike, they're using some public transportation, for example. And then in the evening, they're spending time with their families, they're cooking maybe, they're spending time with their friends and those kind of things. Then I thought, where does some kind of enhancement actually make sense? So let's start in the morning when people are working. They're using apps like Slack, for example, mails, especially nowadays during Corona, where people are starting to work at home, but they don't have a separate screen. So things which would really support the user there would be some kind of like notifications, a second screen, a calendar somewhere where the user could like choose different places, for example. Then we have in the afternoon where it goes really into like navigation. So like support the user at a specific way, and also advertisement, right? So if you think about the restaurant, so if someone is hungry, then finding the perfect restaurants really provides the food that fits to their needs, but also finding ways, communicating with friends. And in the evening, you have more things like, could be a reminder, could be a notification, but could also some guidance for specific things or tasks doing a cooking process, for example. So we talked about different ways where we can integrate that, but where it gets really interesting is when we think how we can interact with that, because this is a completely other challenge, right? So of course, like the very first steps starts with discover. So someone discovers something, could be a screen, could be an augmentation, could be something. The second thing is focus. So the user really looks at that specific element. And then we have some kind of engagement. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. This could be, for example, an okay, so something via voice. And then the experience starts. And when this is finished, the whole thing starts from the very beginning again. So this is kind of interesting because this works differently than interacting with like usual digital interfaces that we're used to interact with. So let's talk a little bit about the ways we can engage with those kind of technologies. There are different ways. We already talked about voice, gestures, we have some kind of eye tracking, and we also have external controls. So let's talk about some examples for voice, because there I'm seeing a lot of interesting opportunities. By the way, all the videos I'm showing don't have voice, so you can't really hear the voice here, but you can check them all out on Twitter. And what's really interesting is to integrate voice in areas where your hands are busy. So where people don't really can use like gestures, for example, where eye tracking doesn't really work because the eyes are busy as well. And yeah, where you can't integrate any external controls. Could be during the cooking process. This also could be during driving, navigation, could also be in the shower. So there, it really makes sense to differentiate between those different use cases. This is an area for navigation. I prototyped real simple, and the whole thing works via voice, so with a digital assistant as well. Then we have things like gestures. That's kind of interesting, but the problem with gestures is that you need a lot of like data to analyze that and tracking. So actually many things don't work out. So it's much easier to have like a specific control or a specific input, which gives you the information you need there. So interesting thing, especially with gestures, but you need to make sure that, you know, it works well, because you need certain kind of cameras to have some kind of a 3D tracking. So besides that, we also have some kind of interactions, because we need to define them actually. And that's, especially for us interaction designers, kind of interesting. So what kind of interactions do we have? We have actually different ones. We have one which is static, so some kind of fix on the glasses. A smartphone could also be your glasses or something like that. So those kind of things really make sure for things which need to be within the user's reach at all the times. Could be a navigation, could be a menu. Because the thing which is really important to keep in mind with AR and VR as well is that you can't really guide the user the same way like with a normal screen. So if the user looks to the right, but the menu is placed somewhere on the right, then that gets really confusing. So you need to make sure that some elements are always in the right reach. But you also have areas that are static and locked in space. This could be specific elements that really belong to a specific place. Imagine that you're going to a supermarket and you get some information about a specific food, could be apples. Then you would assume that they're placed next to the apples and not somewhere else. So really where you need this kind of information. You have also things which are dynamic and flexible on the glass. You know, we just talked about big work experience. If you have a second screen or a calendar, then the best thing would be to really place that somewhere and move that around. Things that are already working pretty well with the HoloLens. If you have interfaces there, you can place them at different areas and then they're staying there actually. So that's already working. We have also three-dimensional elements, which are like some kind of dynamic and flexible in space, especially interesting for like educational elements. And then we have dynamic 3D elements, which are proportionate in space. If we're thinking about retail, like putting a couch somewhere or a chair and then checking the lighting. And yeah, just check out if it really fits to the environment that you have imagined it. And like seeing all those interactions like is super interesting for me actually as a designer, because there are so many things you need to keep in mind when you design for that, right? So you can't really use the same interactions pattern that we're using right now. You need to think much differently about that, because so many things are actually happening in stories. And this is something which is super important to keep in mind and to really find those patterns and share that and learn through that. So we don't only have interactions, we also have interfaces, right? So some kind of elements where information is placed. If we call that interfaces, we can also call it differently, but let's go with interfaces first. Because we don't really know how the interfaces the perfect interfaces might look like. They might look very similar than the interfaces we're having now, or very different. But one interesting problem, I guess, many designers of like among us are having is that there's never enough space on the screen. So when we are designing for a screen, we usually have the problem that there's not enough space. We have too many information. We need to place them somewhere and need to like, you know, keep track of everything. And we don't have that problem when we're designing for AR, because then everything is our screen. So you said everything is a screen, and actually the artist Kaiichi Matsuda took this literally and designed an experience where everything is a screen. And I hope you can see that see that fluent. But the interesting thing is here that you can see so many interfaces and so many kind of information placed everywhere. And I think what gets really obvious here is that all the design guidelines we established are not really followed here. The user is kind of overwhelmed with all the informations, all the screens, all the movement. There are no hierarchies and alignment and repetitions. You have like too many information. So some kind of dystopian, I would even say. And it reminded me a little bit of the websites from the early or mid 90s. You know, this is actually a website from Apple from 1995. And they had very similar problems. No hierarchies, many different typographies, different colors. You don't really know where to look. And what's interesting is that if you look to the right side, we are seeing the Apple website from a few weeks ago. And so many things have changed. We have learned, like, especially in the digital environment, we have learned so much. We focus on hierarchies. We are guiding the user. We trying not to overwhelm the user. And what's, I think, really important to keep in mind is that we should actually use all the things that we learned so years and already integrate that and everything that what comes now. And now I'm also integrating elements, so three-dimensional elements as some kind of interfaces, and using like really three-dimensional, so things like our environment to integrate in some kind of interfaces which are more like spread out. And the other way we can like design interfaces are, of course, two-dimensional interfaces, so some kind of flattened interfaces. Depends, of course, very much on the problem, on the use case, on the things you want to achieve. In this case, this is something for like the future of cooking, so a cooking experience where the focus was really on guidance, so like showing the things which need to be done first, how to cut, how to insert specific things into a pan, and how to cook something. So there, the focus was very much on guidance. So we talked a lot about all those different interface interactions, but what really makes the difference and what gets me so excited actually is everything around personalization. Because with AR, you can personalize literally everything, from the bus sign to someone entering the bus and like having the screen with all the stations until like going outside and finding the way to the office. Everything can be personalized, from every advertisement, from every screen, everything, everywhere, which, you know, opens up, of course, a few problems, but also a lot of opportunities, especially for designers. So I divided this a little bit in like personalized interfaces, which is what I just talked about, but also private content. So what are personalized interfaces, for example? It could be something like a cooking or a shopping experience. Imagine that you are in the grocery store and you have some specific dietary restrictions. You have your personalized shopping list. You want to guide it like through the fastest way through the supermarket, and want to see in the very first glance which food, for example, is vegan or gluten-free or those kind of things. So really provide the information which is relevant for this specific user. We also have private content. This is another really interesting thing. It's a really cool example from Apple, actually. And I guess everyone who has like already like check their banking status, or some private messages in the train, knows about shoulder surfing. So you always need to check like who's standing behind you. Can someone read your messages? Same problem in the train with mails and those kind of things. You don't have that problem with AR, because especially if you're using glasses in the future, things will look, will only be visible for the user, and that's really interesting and will make a huge difference, especially around like personalization. So I talked about all those interesting areas, all the things we can do, and you're probably wondering now, like, when can we start? And the really quick answer is actually in the future. So we are not quite there yet, I would say, and yeah, we are just not quite there yet, and it will take some time. So I think in the next 5 to 10 years, AR is going to be huge. We're having a digital overlay on top of our environment that opens up so many new opportunities for us. And Facebook and Apple are working on their own headset at the moment. So it's just a matter of time until they're releasing that and opening up all those new opportunities. And I think it's super interesting that many designers are still ignoring the fact that we won't have smartphones forever. And I'm not saying that the smartphone is not important. I'm just saying that actually now is a really great time to look into those topics and start learning to design for those areas, because those are the requirements for the future, right? So let's keep in mind, smartphones are just a transitional technology, and we are actually working towards a world without screens, where everything is a screen. And in this world, all the screen space you could ever want for your data visualization is instantly available. And this really will make the difference for our clients, for us, for all the things that we are working on at the moment, I would say. So thank you so much for your attention. If you have questions, if you want to chat about that topic, I am super happy about that. So feel free to text me on Instagram, on Twitter. Yeah, always sharing cool stuff there. So feel free to connect.
Great. Now we
Yay,
salute you. Thank you so much. It was really inspiring, because it's I mean, the other day when I saw your post regarding the buying in a DM, I was like, oh, I wish I could have that to go to the DM that I have just around the corner and to buy it. I mean, it's amazing, and I think a lot of people will ask you for sure. And I think you made a post regarding that, regarding what you did on Adobe, in Adobe, and so on, because it's really interesting to know that Adobe is open to that, and you can apply for it, and so on. People, for sure, a lot of people will ask you about that. We have a question. Yeah, so let's see. Do you know? Sabrina is asking, great info. What would you recommend for someone that wants to start in this field that you are explaining, and how should they start? Yeah. So, like you said, when do we start? How? Where's the playground for this?
So what really actually made the difference for me was even in my very first job, which was interesting. Like 6 years ago or so, I started to prototype and design for VR and AR, which is interesting because it's like it's so far away. But yeah, what really helped me was actually like to learn how to prototype those experiences and then share that with clients, and be able to talk to people who are working with those kind of technologies. Because what was actually like the most difficult thing for the clients I'm working on right now, or even like I worked in the past with, was explaining their ideas and visions. But when they see those kind of things, they see opportunities and possibilities, and that gets people really excited. So my personal recommendation was like to learn how to design for that, how to prototype for that, be able to like connect and to share your learnings. And yeah, I honestly I can't wait for like a time where we are more open to that, where more people are experimenting with those kind of technologies, and yeah, where we can really like exchange experiences.
Yeah, definitely, and also everything that Anna mentioned about the research and so on. You can imagine all the research that you need to do, of course, from it. So it will change a lot of things.
Absolutely.
So
And
yeah, it's
yeah,
crazy.
I think it, oh, no, sorry, but I think it was super interesting what Anna mentioned about, like, you know, all the remote stuff, what's happening at the moment. And it makes, you know, it gets so obvious nowadays that all the workshop situations we're having and all the testing situations we're having, you know, this won't go on like that in the next like 10 or 15 years, because it's, you know, workshops are just not working like that if we're just all sitting in front of the screen. And with AR, or yeah, probably it will be AR, not VR, where we have the, you know, the feeling that someone is joining our room, where we can really work on the same wall with post-its and those kind of things. So this opens up so many opportunities, and the future will be remote, you know, if it's for testing or if it's for design and workshops. So you know, everything goes into remote, and yeah, so there are a lot of opportunities coming up. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to try to read some other. We don't have time for everyone, sorry guys, but I will pick the last one of all. Do we need to have a headset or glasses to be able to design a prototype for AR, or are there any tools that can be used for testing the prototypes?
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question. So first of all, no, you don't need AR glasses for that, the HoloLens or something like that. You can just design things with your phone, which is a really good transitional technologies to get into that. There are great tools out there like Unity 3D, for example. There are great prototyping tools there where you can just like get started and try things out and test that with users. So you don't need HoloLens for that. And even actually like designing for a real HoloLens is not that easy. So my personal recommendation is either like team up with the developer. There are some really cool HoloLens developer out there who are looking for designers and UX designers especially. But yeah, I would honestly focus with on the smartphone and start working with that, because the skills are very similar. And the design, you know, guidelines, I would say.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Okay, let's go with someone from YouTube. Will change.
Yay.
Yeah, so Fabian, I don't know where he's from, probably from Latin America, but he's asking, do you think a goal for virtual reality is to become massive, or this will happen only until we depend on a physical device? So
I think the interesting, that's a really good question, actually, because I think what's really important to understand and keep in mind with VR is that, you know, you are in your own world. It's completely immersive. So it's something you can't do the whole day. And at a specific point, it's a little bit dystopian. And I think you need to keep that in mind. It's not something that you can overlay over your usual world. You are completely like shut out of the real world. And especially at the moment, VR glasses are really bulky. They are heavy. You cannot really wear them more than 2 hours or so. Of course, they are going to get smaller. But like what I am imagining is actually that we are going through a world which is focusing much more on augmented reality, because you can literally display almost everything in AR. With VR, it's very difficult because you need to think about use cases. You know what I did with AR. Think about use cases where VR actually makes sense. And imagine, you know, trying navigation with VR, or going outside, or even like, you know, doing something which is not at your home. I don't think that there is no future for VR. I think there is a future, but only for specific areas and use cases. I think like nowadays it gets really obvious. We are all like stuck at home. We all want to travel. So, you know, even like doing some remote travel would be helpful, or even like remote games and those kind of things, opening up, I think, opportunities to at least do something or use that for for specific kind of treatments. I had a really interesting chat with someone from Instagram who wants to work on like some kind of medical health things with VR, where which I could totally like imagine, because it's so calming, like having those glasses on and then the sound. And yeah, so there are some opportunity spaces, but I think it won't be like 100% like, you know, everything and super huge, because there's still too many problems, I would say, and you're just like really in your own world.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
it was regarding some so we don't have too much time for other questions. We're almost ending the meeting and the Zoom, but yeah, thank you both. Like I said, exactly the same as for Ana. You can follow Patricia and you can ask your questions there. Probably when they have time, they will answer. Don't be so anxious. I was one of them. So before, when I contact them for the event, so yeah, and then yes, they will answer anything for sure. They are super open, and they have just a few followers on Instagram, so you can see so every content that is really valuable. So you will really enjoy follow them. So yeah, this is actually the end. I don't know how to close an event online. This will be the part where we go for the drinks and the food and so on in the real life, but now you can have a drink on your own. By the way, I don't know if you both of you want to say something. I know that you, Patricia, are doing some live on Instagram on Thursday, and Ana, she's doing also something. I don't know if it's podcast or whatever. Just this is the time for advertisement, so you can go for it.
Awesome. Okay. So yeah, everyone who's interested in those kind of technologies or design generally, I'm doing weekly UX after work drinks on Instagram. It's a weekly live session, completely free. I always have interesting guests, and I'm chatting about different topics, always things you can learn, takeaways, but also some nice people to get to know better. I also have a podcast called Future of UX, where I'm talking about the future of design, experience design, everything around the future. So people who are interested about learning more about the future. And yeah, if you want to learn more about AR, VR, definitely write me a message, because there are a few things coming up. And if you're interested in, let me know. Then I'm happy to share a few things with you. And otherwise, also happy to chat. Okay. And now I'm giving to Ana.
Cool. Mike to Ana.
Yes. I don't have any events, I mean, online coming soon. However, I do go live on Instagram. So if you follow me, I usually let everyone know when I go live. And I also, answer questions, or sometimes I have also the question stickers. So yeah, I'm very open to chat about these topics. So yeah. Yeah, I'm probably gonna go live soon now. It inspires me to like Patricia going live every week.
You should join one. I would love to have you in one. Then honestly,
you see, now we have a new event.
About that. But that would be nice to have you.
We already have a new event. Okay, cool. Great. So okay, thank you so much. I can give you there's a lot of thank yous in the YouTube chat, and also some here in the Zoom. So thank you all for joining. This was a pleasure, and for the first time here in Cologne, the first event and online. I hope this can be ending soon for everyone, and everyone is fine and so on. Take care. Don't do things that you don't want, unless I hope everyone stays safe and healthy and so on. My best wishes to all. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Ana, again. And yeah, we will be in touch. I will be uploading some posts regarding these two talks, so with some tips of each. And yeah, so keep it tuned. Stay tuned on the Instagram IDF Cologne, and yeah, you can follow us if you don't follow us yet. Any person that is from Cologne, they can send a message always, and I think we can meet at least 1-to-1 or two or three people with a distance in the park or something here in Cologne to meet us, and I would love to do that because it's really nice to do a real life networking. So thank you again. I wish you a really nice evening to all. So yeah, this is the end.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys, and goodbye to all.
Bye.
Bye
Ciao,
bye.
ciao. Adios.
Bye.